everybody and welcome. Today I have a very special top 5 video. Unlike all of my other previous top 5 videos, this one's going to be about things that I don't like about certain board games. Up until this point, all I've said are games that I like in specific categories or a specific theming, all of that kind of stuff. Today is going to be the exact opposite. Something about specific games that I dislike, or not only just a specific game, but some subgroup of games, some portion of games, whatever it happens to be, that do this specific thing, whether it is something based on mechanics, if it's something based on simply how the game plays or how you have to play it, something based on the materials that you use, anything along those lines. There are just some things that when I open up a box, it just makes me think, ugh. Or if I play a game, it just sort of is always in the back of my mind of, I cannot stand this. So with that, I will say that all of the games that I'm going to be talking about in this list are games that I generally enjoy playing. I like these games. I like the way that they play. I enjoy playing them, and I do play them, but there's just something about them that I don't really like. These are just examples of these specific mechanics or whatever they happen to be, which I will get to, obviously. These are examples, and I'll talk about more games that do similar things, as well as some ways that I personally try to avoid them. So with that, I will go right on ahead with my number 5. At number 5, I have a mechanic of sorts, basically, that plagues a great many games, but the problem is it's a lot of games that I enjoy. The specific example that I have here is diplomacy. And the big problem that I generally have is just the time commitment. And a lot of people tend to have this where, you know, you've got a job and or you go to school, you have other obligations, you've got a family, you want to hang out with your friends, whatever it happens to be. And the problem is with a game like Diplomacy, or Twilight Imperium is the other really major one, you have to commit 7 or 8 hours just to play the game. And the problem is it's a very difficult game to take breaks from, because it's difficult to remember what you were thinking, what was going on, and especially with Twilight Imperium, having to leave the game set up so that you can come back to it later. That said, again, I do enjoy both of these games, both Diplomacy and Twilight Imperium, but the problem is it's one of those things where not only do you have to plan it relatively far in advance, because you're not going to go to a regular game night and say, hey, let's play this 7-hour game. It just doesn't work like that. It's something that you really need to sort of plan ahead. And that's mostly the way that I sort of get around it, is making certain that when I call people and say, I tell them, hey, I want to play Diplomacy, I want to play Twilight Imperium, which I don't have Twilight Imperium, unfortunately, but somebody else that I play with does. So we will say, hey, do you guys want to do Twilight Imperium? And we all agree to it in advance, so that one person isn't like, oh, I don't want to play a 7-hour game, or whatever it happens to be. But like I said, as far as the actual mechanics go, this is something that's relatively minor, because it is something that's built into the games themselves. They are extremely complex games, and therefore they take a great deal of time to play. So it's not too surprising, but at the same time, it can be very difficult to get around, and it relatively frequently prevents me from playing some of these bigger games, not to mention war games such as Labyrinth, Twilight Struggle, and some of those favorite games of mine as well. So that is why the general mechanic of very long play times and things like Diplomacy and Twilight Imperium is my number 5. At number 4, I have something that isn't necessarily based off of the mechanics of a game itself, but rather the manufacturing of the game. And the example that I have is Smash Up. Now I know I have talked about Smash Up a great deal. I do truly love the game. It is a wonderful game to play, but one of the problems that I have with it is just when I open the box. When you open up the box, when you open up Smash Up here, I've already got it all nice and organized. You can see here that on this side we have all the cards. This is all of the cards from the base set, and then over here there's a bunch of empty spots. The problem is that the base set was built with the mindset of we are going to have expansions. That is something that I do not enjoy seeing from board game manufacturers, because what it tells me when I open the box and when I set up my game is, well, this sucks. This means that in a year and a half I'm going to have to go out and buy more stuff for this game. That makes me feel terrible. I don't like that. I don't want to be staring at a game thinking that I just have to go and get more stuff in order to really keep enjoying it and to maybe get the best content. If you're a game manufacturer, then I would say don't plan on having expansions, or if you're going to plan on the expansions, do what something like Thunderstone did, where one of the expansions for Thunderstone was able to fit all of the previous iterations in the one box. That makes so much more sense. If you have the expansion able to fit the base set, then it makes more sense as far as making expansions go, because if you're making a base game with expansions in mind and making the insert for it, then me as a gamer, I get frustrated because I feel like I'm almost being cheated, because I feel like I'm being given a half-empty box for what is obviously a great, wonderful, fun game to play, in the case of Smash Up, but at the same time, I just feel like I'm getting half a game because there's so much more planned that I wasn't given from the get-go. So I say, do what Thunderstone did and make one of the expansions able to fit everything else. But regardless, that is why the inserts that are ready for the expansion materials is my number 4. At number 3, I have what really comes down to a setup mechanic in several different games, and this primarily relates to games where you are playing as specific people. There aren't very many games that do it, but one is Level 7 Escape. The one thing that I really don't like about this game as far as the setup is concerned is the people that you play as. The problem I have with all of the people in Level 7 Escape is they are all the same. Every single player in the game starts off with a unique person, but they are only unique in the fact that their token is different. The cards that they have, the stats that you start with, are all completely identical. It doesn't make sense. It takes half of the setup from the game. You might as well all be just different colored pawns, because you get the same mechanics from it. Or do something like what, you know, things like D&D and the Pathfinder board game and all those do, where if you have a different character, they have a unique ability, they have unique stats, unique capabilities. Pretty much every single role-playing game, be it fantasy, sci-fi, whatever other categories I can't think of right now, but any other type of game like this, I mean, Zombicide did this too as well, where if you have different characters, have them be capable of different things. It makes more sense to have a group of people that can each do something different than to have a group of a bunch of people that are all essentially identical. It just doesn't make sense, and for me it takes away a lot of what the game can be and a lot of the potential that it has. But thankfully, games like this are in the great minority, where the vast majority of these types of games, be it, like I already mentioned, the D&D tile exploration games, Mage Knight, Zombicide, what else? Pretty much, or Eclipse as well in Twilight Imperium, where you get to pick the races. Pretty much any other game that does something like this has that type of mechanic. So I really don't understand why it is that Level 7 Escape is one of the very, very few games that I have run into that has this issue. Now granted, the is it Omega Protocol, the Level 7 Omega Protocol, changed it a decent amount, so now they do have unique characters, at least to a certain extent, which is nice, but at the same time, the first time I played this, I was kind of like, oh, great, this is just like Munchkin, we're all starting as level 1 humans with no class. We are all the same, and that kind of sucks. I enjoy playing a game like Talisman or Descent, where I am the wizard, or I am the warrior, or I am the barbarian, and I have a role, I have a place to fit in the party, as opposed to something like this, where everybody is just so interchangeable, it makes every game feel very, very samey, however you want to say it. But regardless, that is why the level 7 mechanic specifically of having players play as the same people with identical statistics and identical starting points is my number 3. At number 2, I have an aspect of games that solely relates to the parts and pieces that they come with. The game that I'm going to be using as my example is Acquire. There's a very, very specific reason that I chose Acquire specifically for this, but there are several games that really are guilty of this type of thing. And for those of you who aren't aware of Acquire, who have never played it, whatever it happens to be, then I'll tell you the idea is you take these little tiles, a bunch of little square tiles here, and the whole point is that you take your little square tiles and you put them onto a big giant board. Okay, I don't know if you can read that too well, but it's a big giant grid that goes from 1A all the way down to 12I. And the idea is that every player will have some number of these little tiles, and the whole point is once you connect 2 tiles together, you create a company. Let's see, I got American company, that's what it's called. So the idea is that you have 2 tiles and you literally put the corporation on top of it. I know you can't see that too well, but either way, that is neither here nor there. So the idea is that as you're playing this game, I happen to have here 7E and 9H. So we would put these down onto the grid like that. I didn't put them in the right spots, but they're on the grid. And the problem is that when somebody goes to put in a tile in between, inevitably stuff shifts around and starts moving around. And it gets so annoying when you have, you know, half of the board filled up with these little itty bitty tiles and you're trying to put stuff in place and everything keeps shifting and moving around. It gets so annoying so quickly. And one of the reasons, or the main reason that I actually picked this game is because I'm used to primarily playing the original Avalon Hill version. The Avalon Hill version used absolutely incredible little plastic pieces. Instead of having these stupid flat cardboard pieces for all of the individual tiles, they were little plastic things that looked kind of like little huts. Right? It was essentially a cube that was missing the bottom. And the idea was that on the board there was a little raised up portion that your little cube would cover up. So that way, even if you jostled the table a little bit, they wouldn't move because they were locked in place because they were plastic and hanging up over a little hill, essentially. But now, whenever you jostle the table a little bit, then this stuff all moves and flies off. And it's so frustrating and so annoying when you have all of this meticulous little planning of these tiny little cardboard pieces, and whenever somebody accidentally bumps the table to go up and get a drink or a snack or whatever it is, then all of the stuff starts moving around and you have to meticulously put it back where it was, put it right back in its place. Now, like I said, this isn't the only game that does this. There are plenty of games that have really specific piece placement, and it can very easily be jostled. So that's one of the things that I really don't like about some games. But like I said, Acquire, this version of Acquire, that is, this one is the Wizards of the Coast version. This is one that I specifically do not enjoy. The game itself, I like. I like the idea of the game. It's a fun game, but just trying to play it with those little tiles is extremely frustrating and very, very difficult. And again, plenty of other games do very similar things, but I think that Acquire is the best example of let's say manufacturing and piece placement that is not quite very well thought out for the way that the game is intended to be played. At number one, I have a game that represents several aspects of not only game design, but just board games in general that I don't really like. The game itself is Dexter, the board game. And the mechanic that I'm going to be talking about today, or specifically for this video, is the roll and move mechanic. This is something that many games have done over many years. Obviously, the major one is Monopoly, and the problem is that it just gets so frustrating. Again, if you haven't played this game before, it is, for lack of a better term, it's just set collection. That's the entire point of the game, is you're going and you're trying to get specific pieces from the specific killings that Dexter performed. If you're not familiar with it, Dexter, the board game, is based off of Dexter, the TV show, which was on Showtime, which is based off of Dexter, the book series, which was published a while ago. And the whole point is that Dexter is the serial killer who's a vigilante, and he's helping people because he only kills murderers and blah, 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 blah. It's a cool story. It's a really good show. It's a really good book series. I highly recommend them. I do not recommend playing the board game. The board game is not fun at all. And one of the biggest reasons behind that is this mechanic. You roll the dice and you move that many spaces. The problem is that in order to collect your little sets of stuff you have to get your person, you have to get your murder weapon, and you have to go to the specific place where it occurred. The problem with that is if you roll too much, you move past it. If you move past it, you have to go all the way around the board again to try again. It makes no sense. It is a completely arbitrary limitation on the capabilities of the players. It's just ridiculous. Why would you do that? It is a pointless game design mistake. It doesn't make any difference for the game itself if you've got somebody who has everything already collected and they're just going around in circles a whole bunch, and then you get somebody who just gets lucky and is able to finish it before the other person does because they're sitting there going around in circles. It's just ridiculous. It makes no sense, and it takes away from the game itself because it is a completely arbitrary mechanic, and frankly archaic mechanic at that. That said, it is fixable. There actually is a mechanic within the game itself where if you're going by a hardware store where you go and get whatever the weapon is that you need, if you were to move past the hardware store, you can actually stop on it instead. So that is written into the rules, and essentially the way that I play this now is with that rule retcon for everything else. If there's a specific person that you want to land on, then boom, you can stop there and land on that person and then collect them. Same thing if you are trying to go to the last location so that you can essentially complete the game, boom, you can stop there if you were going to go past it. Because again, it's pointless to have these extra die movements. It doesn't do anything for the game itself. It doesn't do anything thematically. It doesn't do anything for anybody anywhere, right? So, that said, The Dexter the board game is my example of my #1 disliked mechanic of die-based movement. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed my video on my top 5 most disliked board game mechanics and or construction problems. However you want to put it. Either way, I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you liked the discussion that I had, some of the fixes that I had potentially. If you have any other games that either fit this description, or if you have other game mechanics that bug you to no end, or if you just want to tell me how wrong I am and how great diplomacy is, whatever you want to do, feel free to just leave it in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to have discussions, just hear your feedback, whatever it happens to be. And with that, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so that you can see more like it, as well as more on science and video games and more board gaming stuff and all sorts of other different things. But with that, regardless, once again, thank you very much for watching it, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much again for watching my video on my top 5 board gaming dislikes, be they mechanics or construction based. If you have your own board gaming dislike, or just want to talk about the ones I mentioned, or just say that I'm completely wrong, feel free to put it in the comments below. In addition, if you want to see more of my videos, there are a few linked up at the top of the page, and you can also see my future videos by clicking that big giant subscribe button, and you can see more on board games, video games, as well as scientific principles and policies. Thank you very much again for watching, and I will see you next time.